welcome you to a deeply reflective kind of deep dive today. We're stepping beyond reports and data, immersing ourselves instead in the shimmering, unsettling world of Chapter 2 from the audiobook, The Core and the Vibration. Marble does not caress. This isn't a narrative to simply follow or, a plot to unravel. Instead, it's a space to be felt, a unique experience narrated by the author himself that leaves you with this kind of lingering sensation, an emotional afterimage.
Indeed. And what we're about to embark on is, well, it's less a summary and certainly not a typical review.
Right.
Think of it as an intimate, slow, almost poetic unfolding of the sensations that just sort of arise after experiencing this chapter. It's like waking up in a memory that isn't quite your own,
Yeah.
A memory woven from silence, the cold touch of stone, and the profound weight of unspoken things. We're going to let the echoes of the chapter guide us, allowing ourselves to pause, to wonder, and maybe even to gently brush against disagreements, as if our minds are just exploring the nuances of a shared, dimly lit space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our mission here isn't to solve a mystery or deliver definitive answers. Our mission is to dwell in the texture of the silence that permeates this chapter, to consider the profound symbolism of the marble, to explore the meaning of a space left sealed, and to truly feel the peculiar, chilling emotional architecture of a child's forgotten world. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's feel our way through the chapter together.
Let's begin. The architecture of silence. Edward's self-constructed world.
So the chapter plunges us right into this profound and chilling transformation in Edward. Between the tender ages of 8 and 9, something fundamental shifts. He simply stops speaking.
Just stops.
And it's crucial to understand this isn't a speech impediment or, a sudden loss for words. It's something far more deliberate, far more profound, a chilling realization that rewires his entire being. The text tells us, words were bridges, and bridges could be crossed in both directions. That imagery is so potent, isn't it?
It really is. Bridges connect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It suggests that communication, the act of speaking, inherently creates a pathway. When you speak, you extend an invitation, you offer a connection, but that connection is two-way.
Right. It means others can cross over to you, enter your space, maybe even your vulnerabilities.
To speak is to be exposed, to be reachable.
And this is precisely where the contrast with silence becomes so stark, so powerful. The chapter states, silence, on the other hand, was a wall, and well-constructed walls were impregnable.
A wall. Not just quietness.
Exactly. This isn't a passive withdrawal, a quiet retreat into shyness. No, this is an active strategic fortification. Edward isn't just quiet, he's building something, brick by silent brick, around himself.
Yeah.
What's truly fascinating here is how his silence isn't a mere lack of sound, but a deliberate construction, a chosen architecture. It makes you reconsider silence not as an absence, but as a deliberate presence, a conscious act of self-definition. If we connect this to a broader psychological framework, it suggests that true power, or at least a certain kind of impenetrable self, is built not on expression and openness, but on withholding and strategic concealment.
Which raises a really important question for us to ponder, doesn't it?
It does. What kind of freedom does this kind of silence truly offer? Is it a liberation from vulnerability, or maybe a different, more profound kind of confinement?
What he builds is described as being devoid of flesh. The chapter meticulously details the things Edward systematically stops doing. He no longer ran, no longer asked, no longer dreamed.
Let's just pause on that for a moment. Running, asking, dreaming.
Yeah, the implications are truly profound. Running, for a child, is that spontaneous physical expression, joy, freedom, escape. Asking is about curiosity, about seeking connection, about relying on others for answers.
And dreaming. That's the realm of the subconscious, isn't it? Unguarded desires, fears, where our deepest selves often roam free.
So by eradicating these seemingly innocent, fundamental human actions, he's systematically stripping away the most spontaneous, the most vulnerable, the most unbidden parts of himself.
It's not just suppression. It feels like an internal amputation of his own vitality.
It really does. He transforms, quite chillingly, into a pure observer, detached and calculating. His perception of the external world, once perhaps a playground of interaction and emotion, becomes a safe without a password.
Wow. A safe without a password.
This new, profound silence changes everything, casting the world outside as something distant, impenetrable, a perfect mirror of his own internal state. Everything beyond him is locked away, just as he is locked away himself.
It's a profound, almost terrifying symmetry.
that he consciously architects.
And the parental reactions to this radical transformation are, well, arguably even more chilling than the act itself. His father.
All the five.
Instead of showing concern or alarm or even confusion, he celebrates this transformation. In silence, yes, but celebrates it. We hear him murmuring, "Finally understood," seeing it as the seed of the lineage blooming.
Finally understood. What does that even mean in this context?
It implies, well, consider the implications of this parental approval of such profound emotional detachment. It suggests a deeply embedded family legacy of emotional distance,
The
right?
generational pattern.
Exactly, where vulnerability is perceived as a weakness to be eradicated, and silence, or rather the mastery of emotional withholding, is celebrated as a sign of strength, a blossoming of a desired, almost genetic trait.
It's not just acceptance, it's an active endorsement of his self-imposed isolation. It hints at this cycle of emotional calcification passed down through generations.
Which compels us to ask, what kind of lineage thrives on such a profound lack of genuine human connection? What kind of family considers emotional imperviousness a virtue? It's disturbing.
And the stark contrast with his mother's reaction couldn't be more painful. Her response is the inverse, a tragic counterpoint to the father's chilling affirmation.
Right, we learn she begins to unfirmar, to fall ill, but not physically. Her skin remains terse, her makeup impeccable, yet her soul starts to dim.
Getting paler and more silent each week. It's as if his deliberate silence, his active becoming marble, just siphons the very life force from her.
And that phrase, as if the absence of the governess had revealed a void that even she didn't know inhabited her, that's incredibly poignant.
The governess may be a source of warmth or an emotional buffer. Her departure uncovers this deeper, unacknowledged emptiness within the mother herself.
An emptiness that Edward's new, impenetrable silence now mirrors, amplifies, and perhaps even feeds upon. Her slow fading becomes this tragic measure of his hardening.
And her decline manifests in these increasingly fragmented whispers, these profoundly unconnected bursts of speech, murmuring by the plants, staring at her wedding photo.
Repeating lines like, "I saw it before but didn't want to see it. I knew it and still I stayed. Oh, that's heartbreaking."
It isn't just a mother fading away, it's a soul in quiet dissolution, caught in this loop of regret and the agonizing recognition of a truth she consciously refused to face.
And Edward, with his newly cultivated, detached gaze, perceives her not as a suffering individual but as a reflection, fragments of something that was perhaps light but no longer had form.
He doesn't see pain or sadness. He sees an abstract, broken image, a puzzle he can observe without feeling. It's a complete, almost clinical renunciation of empathy on his part.
And perhaps the most chilling aspect of this growing detachment comes when he finds her asleep on the sofa, clutching an old dress. His thought.
Yeah, death must be a little like that, not the end, but a prolonged renunciation.
Not grief, not sorrow, not even fear of loss, just an observation. A detached intellectual assessment of death as merely another form of calculated withdrawal, a profound and prolonged letting go.
It highlights the frightening extent of the emotional void he's cultivated within himself. Just chilling. 2. The Marvel's embrace. Perfection and absence as emotional control. Which brings us, I think, directly to the profound and inescapable symbolism of marble woven throughout the chapter.
Marble, yes.
It's far more than just a building material. It emerges as a philosophy, a very specific way of being in the world. There's that striking, almost axiomatic line. Marble does not caress. It only allows itself to be touched when convenient.
That single sentence tells you everything about its inherent nature, doesn't it? It's cold, hard, unyielding, and profoundly demanding.
It dictates the terms of interaction. If you wish to touch marble, you must do so on its terms. It offers no reciprocal warmth, no comfort, no soft embrace.
It becomes a perfect, chilling metaphor for the precise emotional state Edward is so diligently cultivating within himself, a state of absolute control and deliberate inaccessibility.
And this concept ties directly into an ancient wisdom, a sculptor's maxim that the chapter applies to the human spirit. Marble does not exculpate, it frees. The statue is already inside. One only has to remove what is superfluous.
This isn't simply advice for a sculptor working with stone. It's a profound philosophical stance, isn't it? The idea that perfection isn't achieved by adding, but by revealing what is already there through a process of subtraction.
But here, it's applied not to a block of stone, but to the very self.
And this concept of removing what is superfluous is presented as a powerful metaphor for self-control, but within the context of Edward's transformation, it's taken to an extreme of emotional eradication. It's not about refinement or true self-improvement in a compassionate sense.
No, it's about calcification, hardening the soul until it becomes impervious.
Which raises a critical question for us. In the realm of human emotion, is there truly a difference between achieving perfection and simply achieving absence? Can something truly be considered perfect if it has been stripped of all feeling, all vulnerability, all that makes it inherently human?
It's a difficult question, and Edward applies this ancient wisdom to himself with a brutal, almost surgical precision. He actively begins to sculpt his own soul, consciously removing what he deems superfluous from his emotional landscape.
The text is heartbreakingly specific. He removed the Sunday laughter, he removed the warmth of hugs, he removed the desire to be loved unconditionally.
Just think about the sheer, fundamental emotional weight of those things. Laughter, particularly the spontaneous, unguarded joy of a Sunday. Physical affection, the comfort and security of a hug, and the fundamental human need for unconditional love.
These are the very cornerstones of emotional connection, vulnerability, and trust.
By systematically excising these, he's tearing away the most vital threads of his human tapestry. And what does he put in their place? The chapter tells us he installs the foundations of something else: an access code, a primitive algorithm, a bottomless mirror.
Chillingly mechanical. A deconstruction of human warmth into cold logic. An access code implies exclusivity, control, a barrier.
A primitive algorithm suggests a programmed, predictable response, entirely devoid of spontaneity or genuine emotion.
And a bottomless mirror. That's perhaps the most disturbing image. It implies an endless, isolating reflection of self, with no external input, no true connection, a complete, narcissistic, closed loop where only his own hardened image is reflected back.
It's a self-construction built on impenetrable logic and an emotional void.
This concept of self-sculpting to such an extreme is precisely where we see the philosophical boundaries pushed, perhaps even shattered. Edward's chilling internal question, what good was love if it couldn't be controlled? That truly encapsulates this utilitarian view of human emotion.
Right. He's assessing love, arguably the most powerful and unpredictable of human experiences, based purely on its practical value and its susceptibility to management.
If love introduces variables, vulnerability, and an inherent unpredictability that he cannot master, then from this cold, calculating perspective, it's not something to be embraced, but something to be deemed inefficient, a liability, even useless.
It isn't just a rejection of love. It's a profound rejection of its very essence, its wildness, its power to destabilize and transform, and most importantly, its capacity to make one vulnerable.
It's the ultimate utilitarian calculus applied to the heart.
And it begs the deepest question. How does an 8 or 9-year-old come to adopt such a profoundly detached, almost philosophical worldview? It feels almost innate, doesn't it?
It does. Yet the chapter offers insights into his learned detachment. It tells us he learned this philosophy in the gestures of his father, in the absences of his mother, in the eyes of Silvio, in the perfume of the women who never looked him in the eyes.
Each of these is a subtle, almost subliminal, nonverbal lesson. His father's gestures communicate a certain rigidity, maybe a demand for unspoken understanding or adherence to unspoken rules.
His mother's emotional and physical absences teach him about emotional voids and the unreliability of presence.
Silvio's eyes and the indifference of the women he encounters reinforce a world where connection is either transactional, manipulative, or just non-existent. These are all external influences, passive lessons absorbed from his environment.
Shaping his nascent understanding of human interaction. But then
the chapter delivers the ultimate punchline, the most significant and profound source of his learning. He had also learned it in himself.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets truly unsettling and fascinating. How does one teach oneself to become marble, to eradicate one's own emotional core?
It's not just mimicry, is it?
No, it's an internal process of self-creation, a conscious, active decision to internalize and perfect this philosophy of detachment. It implies an innate predisposition, perhaps, a particular kind of solitude, an analytical and self-aware mind, even at such a young age.
Allowing him to not just observe these lessons from his environment, but to actively apply them, to sculpt his own psychological architecture.
He wasn't simply shaped by his environment, he actively chose to become its ultimate expression, a self-sculpted monument to absolute emotional control. It suggests a deep internal will, almost a predestined path, towards this unique and solitary form of mastery. 3. The beginning of the gaze. Perception before language and power.
So with emotions and words systematically stripped away, what remains is perception, a keen, almost surgical analytical gaze.
The gaze, yes.
Edward now spends hours observing the world around him, almost dissecting it with his eyes. His mind, unburdened by the need to communicate or to feel, becomes this finely tuned instrument of observation. We hear that he watches men on the street as if they were chess pieces. That's such a powerful and dehumanizing image, isn't it?
Chess pieces, predictable movements, specific functions, entirely strategic value, not individuals with inner lives, complexities, emotions, just components in a larger game.
To be moved and sacrificed. He identifies their routines, their gestures, their fear, not with empathy, not with any sense of shared humanity, but with a detached, almost scientific precision.
He's cataloging data points, observing predictable patterns, extracting useful information. Like a researcher.
This isn't just passive observation, though, is it?
No, it's more. It's a form of pre-linguistic calculation, a silent, unfiltered mode of data processing. He's perceiving reality before language can cloud or complicate it.
Before language obscures things with assumptions, biases, social niceties.
Exactly. Without that filter, Edward's perception is unadulterated, raw, purely analytical. He's able to recognize the hidden price of every smile, suggesting this profoundly transactional, calculating view of human interaction, even from such a young age.
Every social gesture, every outward display of warmth isn't genuine connection, but something with an underlying cost, an expectation, a quid pro quo.
It's a chilling insight into the world he inhabits and the deeply cynical lens through which he views it. He sees the strings attached to every human exchange.
And the pivotal moment in the development of this new, detached way of seeing is when his father takes him to the private family club.
Ah, the club.
It's described with such evocative imagery. A construction of white marble, Doric columns, and echoes of defeated empires.
The setting itself is hugely significant marble, again, signifying cold permanence, untouchable power, maybe a certain rigid beauty.
The Doric columns evoke classical strength and order, while the echoes of defeated empires hint at a legacy of dominance, power struggles, perhaps the cyclical nature of power itself. This isn't just a place, it's an institution, a repository of history and influence.
And here, for the first time, Edward sees what he shouldn't see. Men making decisions with cognac glasses, women dressed in power, screens lit up with maps not seen on the news.
The unveiling of a hidden world, the true levers of influence operating behind the scenes.
And his father's instruction is simple, precise, and profoundly impactful. Listen, but don't speak.
A direct continuation, almost a culmination, of his silent education, reinforcing that true power lies in observation, not participation, in absorbing without revealing.
And this is precisely where his understanding of power truly crystallizes, moving beyond mere observation to a profound comprehension. He observed Silvio.
Yes.
A close friend of his father, described with soft fingers like serpents, distributing cards, promises, and favors with the precision of a forensic doctor.
Soft fingers like serpents. That's unsettling imagery. Cunning, silent movement, hypnotic influence, subtle danger.
And the comparison to a forensic doctor implies meticulous dissection, an understanding of every minute detail, every weakness, every vulnerability in a person or a situation.
From this chilling observation, Edward has a profound realization that power was not a tower but a network, and that blood was no longer spilled with swords but with contracts.
A radical shift, isn't it? From a simplistic, hierarchical, overt display of strength to a decentralized, insidious web of influence.
Where conflict isn't physical or violent, but legal, economic, psychological. It's a sophisticated, almost modern understanding of control. The true battleground isn't the battlefield, but the boardroom and the quiet corridors of influence.
And Silvio, with that almost unsettlingly soft and precise approach, delivers a cryptic compliment to Edward. Your father says you're brilliant. We'll see if that's true.
Not a compliment to encourage or uplift. It's a challenge, a test, an immediate assessment of potential utility.
And it leads Edward to a profound, sleepless night of realization, a truly chilling moment of understanding. Being brilliant wasn't enough. One had to be necessary, and no one is necessary if they don't have something that others desire.
A stark, cold lesson in value and leverage. Brilliance, while perhaps innate, is insufficient on its own. Necessity is earned through the strategic cultivation of desired assets.
Information, connections, control, some other intangible commodity. It's not about being inherently good or intelligent. It's about being indispensable, about holding the keys to what others crave, about leverage.
It's a transactional, deeply cynical view of human worth, where your value is directly proportional to your utility to others.
And here's where this silent education intensifies, becoming truly profoundly disturbing. This isn't just about observation, it's about a new form of pedagogy. A pedagogy without affection, without notebooks, without tenderness.
Silvio becomes his true, albeit chilling, mentor, instructing him not just in what to see, but crucially, in how to see.
He teaches Edward the art of looking, not just observing or spying, but looking as one who undresses with the mind, as one who calculates without blinking.
Penetrating facades, stripping away layers of pretense, civility, social expectation to get to the raw, vulnerable core of another human being.
It's a cold, analytical gaze designed not for understanding, but for exposing weakness and identifying points of exploitation. It's a lesson in psychological X-ray vision.
And Silvio's core teaching, delivered in a moment of cynical clarity while a woman laughs too loudly in the next room. It's truly disturbing in its simplicity and its complete deconstruction of human nature.
He teaches Edward that every human being is a formula, that trust is just a predictable curve, that everybody has its price, its breaking point, its programmed surrender.
Reducing the vast, complex, beautiful messiness of humanity to a set of solvable variables, a predictable equation. Trust isn't an organic bond.
No, it's merely a calculable trajectory, a statistical probability. And the most cynical point, every single person has a weakness, a price, a precise point at which they will break and submit.
A complete deconstruction of human dignity and complexity, seeing only exploitable vulnerabilities, a terrifying blueprint for control.
And the ultimate lesson, the final nail in the coffin of Edward's emotional world, delivered with quiet, brutal finality. What makes you weak is not emotion. It's the desire for the other to understand you. Free yourself from that, and the world will be yours.
Wow. Not just suppressing feelings.
No, actively severing the fundamental human need for recognition, for being seen and understood by another. That desire, that vulnerable yearning for connection, validation, empathy, that is painted as the ultimate liability.
To truly achieve control, to master one's environment and others, one must become a solitary island, demanding nothing, expecting nothing, needing nothing from anyone else.
Edward doesn't respond aloud, but the chapter makes it clear. He understands.
And in that profound, silent understanding, another layer of silence is added to his soul, like a layer of varnish over the marble.
Reinforcing the architecture of silence he's been so diligently building, making it even more impenetrable, more polished, more complete, utterly impervious.
A final, perfect seal. 4. The echo in the sealed chamber, innocence, forbidden knowledge, and the unturned knob.
But throughout this relentless process of hardening, of refining himself into marble, there's this recurring, haunting presence.
Yes, the absence of the governess and her empty, locked office.
It acts as such a profound counterpoint to his calculated detachment. This space functions almost as a sealed box, a silent vault holding a secret. Maybe a forgotten piece of Edward's own innocence.
A glimpse of the child he systematically dismantled. It's not just an empty room. It's described as the door always closed like an embalmed secret.
Embalmed, that word is so striking, isn't it? It suggests something preserved, perhaps dead, but held in stasis, untouched, unchanging, protected from decay.
It gives the space an almost funerary quality, as if it holds what was removed from him, or what could have been. It carries immense symbolic weight.
Representing an untouched past, a path not taken, a version of himself deliberately abandoned and laid to rest.
This is truly the heart of the chapter's deep emotional resonance, isn't it? The moment that cracks open the marble, just a sliver.
It is. It's not about what's literally inside the sealed box, but what that closed door represents for Edward's psyche, for the possibility of a different self.
The chapter describes a singular, profound instant. A single instant, one morning after a silent dinner, when Edward passes the empty office. In that moment, something inside him broke without a sound.
Without a sound, entirely internal, unheard by anyone but himself, signifying its deep, personal, existential significance, a fracture in his carefully constructed armor.
He stops, places his hand on the bronze knob. That physical act of almost opening it, almost crossing that forbidden threshold, is crucial. But he did not turn it.
He doesn't turn it. Yet, in that fleeting touch, he feels a brief, ancient pulsation that he did not know how to name.
A pulsation, nameless and ancient. It suggests a deep, primal stir, something fundamentally human, something that has lain dormant, buried beneath layers of silence and marble.
A whisper from a past self, a faint echo of connection, a thrumming of life beneath the cold stone.
And the realization that follows this mysterious pulsation is profoundly significant. a moment of startling self-recognition. He feels as if in some corner of that closed room there lived an echo of himself, a child still intact, an uncarved fragment.
The very core of the sealed box theme, his lost innocence, his untouched potential, a path not taken. The flicker of recognition that a softer, more complete version of himself still exists, however faintly.
The part that hasn't been sculpted away by the father's lessons or Silvio's cynical pedagogy. The part that remains vulnerable, capable of feeling, maybe even capable of love.
In that instant, Edward, the child who was no longer a child, had the certainty that his soul still existed.
Not a vague feeling or a hopeful wish, a certainty, a profound, undeniable knowing, a fleeting, radiant moment of self-recognition.
A glimpse of the soul he thought he had systematically eradicated and replaced with marble. But
Then comes the ultimate choice, and perhaps the most tragic culmination of his journey towards absolute emotional control.
But he left it there. He didn't open it, he just kept walking.
He walks away.
This is the defining moment. The greatest act of self-control is not just building walls, not just stripping away the superfluous, but consciously choosing not to open a door to one's own vulnerable core, even when its existence is undeniable and affirmed from within.
He doesn't destroy it. He simply seals it away, consciously choosing perpetual detachment over the terrifying possibility of integration, a return to vulnerability.
It signifies a definitive, active rejection of a path back to a more whole, emotionally connected self. He knows his soul exists, he feels its ancient thrum, but he chooses to embalm it.
To leave it locked away, untouched and unacknowledged within the meticulously constructed architecture of his silence.
It's a powerful and profoundly disturbing testament to the ultimate, perhaps irreversible, cost of absolute control. Outro.
So what does this all mean for us, you, the listener, after dwelling in this unique chapter? This deep dive leaves us with so much to reflect upon.
It really does.
We've explored the deliberate construction of silence, not as an absence, but as a formidable, fortified presence. We've considered the cold, smooth perfection of marble, symbolizing a self-sculpted detachment where love is controlled and emotion is deemed superfluous.
We've traced the piercing, calculating gaze that reduces humanity to predictable formulas and breaking points.
And we've sat with that singular fleeting moment before a closed door where a child, no longer a child, feels the ancient pulsation of an intact soul, only to make the conscious, chilling choice to leave it perpetually sealed away.
It's a powerful exploration of the profound cost of absolute control, the intricate architecture of a hardened self, and the subtle, often unseen ways we might choose to leave vital parts of ourselves unaccessed, unnurtured, perhaps even embalmed. The chapter doesn't offer easy answers or neat resolutions, but rather invites us to sit with these sensations, these unsettling truths about human nature, and the deliberate choices we make, consciously or unconsciously, in shaping our emotional landscapes.
It compels us to consider the paths we forge and those we consciously bypass, even when a glimpse of our authentic, vulnerable selves flickers into view.
And that, for me, is what makes this so utterly captivating. It's less about understanding a linear plot and far more about feeling the immense weight of these choices, the texture of that silence, the profound coldness of that marble, and the reverberation of that unturned knob.
It leaves us with a lingering, unresolvable question, one that this chapter, like the silence Edward embraced, refuses to fully answer. What becomes of a soul that knows it exists, that feels its ancient pulse, but chooses to leave itself perpetually sealed away, locked within its own meticulously constructed silence?